Done. Anisha, you're on.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Just want to go ahead and give the same virtual public meeting notice that I always give. The city of Fort Lauderdale will be hosting its meetings in a virtual format until further notice. The public can listen and view the virtual meetings at fortlauderdale.gov/FLTV or on Comcast Channel 78 and AT&T U-verse Channel 99. For those who want to speak on an agenda item and have not already signed up to do so, they can visit www.fortlauderdale.gov/VC meetings to sign up to speak. And to help to ensure that we remain the same decorum as an in-person meeting, we ask that you please abide by the following guidelines. Please refrain from any behavior that is disruptive. While you're on the phone waiting for your opportunity to speak, please mute the meeting broadcast on FLTV. And once you've completed speaking, you will be muted and you may either hang up or exit the meeting or stay connected to listen to the remainder of the meeting. With that, Madam Chair, I pass it back over to you.
All right. Let's go to the agenda and we will call the roll. Pauline, would you call the roll, please? Or whoever calls the roll.
Chair
Crystal.
Mamano.
Krista.
Yep. Mr. Zeltman,
Here.
Mr. Partington,
Here.
Mr. Walters. He's still having audio issues, but he is present. Ms. Scott,
Present.
Mr. Angeli,
Here.
Mr. Marshall, Mr. Grabsky,
Here.
Mr. Ladd,
Here.
Chair Mamano.
Here.
Madam Chair, you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving along. Approval of the agenda. Everybody has got a copy of the agenda?
So
Okay.
moved. So moved.
We have a request to move on the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Anyone opposed, say aye. I assume everybody else is a yay. Moving on. Okay, now we have 2 minutes to approve, February 1 and March 1. As I recall, the February 1 was deferred because there was some question as to the meaning of, I believe it was Mr. Spencer's comments. Peter, you were the one who brought it up. Am I remembering correctly?
Yes, and
Okay.
I've read them over, the minutes from that meeting, and I'm comfortable with what's shown now.
Okay, excellent then. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 1 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Moving on. Has everybody had an opportunity to read the minutes of the March 1 meeting? And are there any comments?
I move to approve.
Thank you,
Second.
Jackie. We got a second. Everybody wants to approve the minutes of the March meeting? Say aye.
Aye.
Moving on. Oh, we are good.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
I would like to add that the communication to commission from the board will be on tomorrow's agenda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Would you read that communication? Do you have it immediately available?
I do.
This was the communication we asked to be sent to the commission at the last meeting.
It reads, motion made by Mr. Partington, second by Mr. Angeli, that the Infrastructure Task Force Committee requests that the city manager and city commission uses any designated CIP funds that become available as a result of surtax funding be repurposed for other transportation projects in a voice vote. The motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So it's on for tomorrow. Anybody who wants to add their voice to that can either call their commissioner who appointed them, or you can just zoom in on the meeting and ask to, speak on it. You don't even have to speak. You can just click on the button that says you have a comment and just put it in writing, and it gets added to the record.
Are you going, Marilyn? Are you going to be on?
Tomorrow, let me see. Tomorrow, yeah, I may be on.
Because it seems like when we send communications from any committee, somebody needs to be there if there's questions.
Yeah, I will try and be there.
Okay.
Because it's so easy now, because I'm on Zoom.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So thank you, Pauline. Now, moving on the agenda, general discussion and comment by committee members, okay? Pauline, I have a question for you on this. I had added at the last minute a couple of items that I don't know that they got into the package. One of them was the letter that I wrote as the chairperson of the committee to Congressman Debbie Schultz regarding a grant. Could you give me the screen for a minute and I'll put that up? Whoever controls the screen.
I believe I included it. The
Oh,
last,
did you? Oh,
yeah, the
good.
last
Can you
one
go
that-
down to it?
yes,
All right. It's a long way down then.
yeah.
Okay, well, she's looking for it. Let me tell you what this is about. I got a call from Raj and Anisha, and they asked me if I would look at a grant application that the city was making for some federal money. No, darling, this is the impact fee thing. Is it further down?
That this was the last item that I received.
Okay.
Madam
so-
Chair, it's not in there. It's not in the packet, but I can speak to it or you can speak to the issue.
I can speak to the issue and I can also put up the letter because I have a copy on my desktop.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing so you can. Madam.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, share screen. Desktop. It's on my desktop. Hold on, I will go find it for you all. Schultz letter. Here it is. Okay, can everybody see that?
No,
You can't see that? All
Nope.
right.
No, Madam Chair, you're not sharing yet. Is
All
this
right.
regarding
This is
This is-
regarding the grant.
the Middle
uh,
River Water Quality Improvements Project?
I don't think so. I think this was a different grant.
Okay.
Okay, hold on just a minute. I am not share. All right, I'm sorry, share. How's that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I was asked to write this letter to Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and it's about the city of Fort Lauderdale, to review, okay, enormous amount of money. The requested project focuses on the installation of tidal valves and other stormwater infrastructure. So this is the one about tidal valves and infrastructure. Do you want to talk a little bit about the project itself? Because I'm not familiar with the project as much as I am with the concept. That's to you, Anisha.
I'm not sure we're talking about the same project. I'm talking about the project that is for $9 million, the joint project with Oakland Park and Wilton Manors. This is
We're
something
gonna get to
different.
that. We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
This is the different one. This is,
Okay,
and I was opining just before we started the meeting that it seems that a lot of federal money is being shaken loose for a lot of infrastructure projects. And this is one of them. This is a $1.2 million grant, the downtown Fort Lauderdale Stormwater Tidal Valve Replacement Project. Okay? So it's part of the master plan, the stormwater master plan. The city has a plan to install a lot of these stormwater valves that keep the water from backing up and the streets from flooding. This
Chair
would be
Romano,
for-
this is Nancy Gassman.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Can you explain this?
This is not part of the Stormwater Master Plan. This is in our current community investment plan. It's essentially the installation of up to about 100 tidal valves into the downtown catch basins to reduce tidal flooding in the areas of Sailboat Bend and downtown.
Great. Okay,
Okay.
that's wonderful. And we should support it. And so what I did is in response to their request for some support, because obviously when you make these applications to the federal government, you're supposed to send in letters of community support and et cetera. So I put together this letter. It was, like at 5 o'clock and it needed to be in at 5:30. And I wrote it as the chairperson of the committee and not from the committee since we hadn't discussed it. But I wanted to bring it up today to ask if you all wanted as a group to support the city's application for these additional funds. Nancy, am I correct? This is additional funds?
Omar, I see you're on unmute. Did you have something to offer?
Yeah, I just had a question. Is this a CIP project that has already been looked at or planned, or is this completely different?
This is a combination of projects, Omar. I think there are actually 5 different listings, and the combined cost of each of these is in the range of $1.2 million.
Okay. So it's okay. All right.
So, good. So any money that we can get, either if it's additional money or if it's a substitution, that frees up other money to do other things. Am I explaining this correctly, Nancy? Let's get Nancy back.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so it's a good thing either way you look at it, right?
Any additional funding that we can receive will help, as you note, free up money and make that available for other needs within the city.
Okay. All right, so I would put it to the members of the committee. Would somebody like to make a motion supporting the downtown Fort Lauderdale stormwater tidal valve replacement project? And then we could just forward that on to the Congresswoman's office, that this is a committee recommendation and not just from the chair.
Move approval of sending the letter as drafted.
Second.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Everybody in favor, please say aye.
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 Any objections? Okay, so there we go. That was the one thing under general discussion that I had wanted to add that was not in the backup material. Everything else is in the backup material. And the second one that's all the way down on the bottom of the backup material, which I will now give back the screen so that Pauline can put the materials back up. And Anisha, you want to talk about that other project, that joint Tri-City project?
Sure, I can talk about that project. So this project that Chair Mamano is mentioning is a joint agreement between Fort Lauderdale, Oakland Park, and Wilton Manors. And it's for federal appropriations for the Middle River Water Quality Improvement Project to mitigate impacts of climate change. And so this collaborative model that they're working on, they've actually submitted everything to the Congress. And we hope to receive $9 million for this particular project. Dr. Gassman may have some additional information because she was actually very involved in some of the meetings that took place. Dr. Gassman, you have anything else to add?
The major intention of the project is to try to look at innovative ways to reduce storm surge impacts throughout the Middle River Basin. So the idea is to put some sort of a structure that could be activated in the situation of either a high tide or a storm surge that would block flows from coming into the Middle River Basin during that time, which would reduce inland flooding in Wilton Manors, Oakland Park, and in northern Fort Lauderdale.
Are we talking innovative projects like a dike or something?
That this would be some type of mechanical structure that could be opened or closed to ensure that there's not a navigational impact, but that would provide a barrier to significant high water from entering into that basin during extreme events.
Okay, Peter.
So it's like a mini, it's a question, it's like a mini Thames barrage. And the question that arises from that, does that then mean that the downstream properties are going to have to raise their seawalls as water piles up behind this?
So the request for funding is for the Army Corps of Engineers to study this type of project to determine what the potential benefits might be. So it is not for them to run in and construct it. It is for them to determine if it's a feasible study.
Excuse me, Peter, can you take over the meeting? I have an emergency. I'll be back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, the funding is being requested by the Army Corps.
The three cities have submitted a request to the Army Corps for them to study this type of project. And we are working with Congressman Deutsch's office to advocate for the project.
Okay, so this is a ways out from any implementation, obviously, and even if it is successful at this point, it doesn't free up any city money per se. This is like a new approach to this area, correct?
This is a new approach under the umbrella of trying to install resilient infrastructure that makes the area more resilient.
Okay. Any other questions of
I have
Dr.
a question. I have a question, Peter.
Yes.
I should have asked this after Marilyn spoke about the letter she wrote, and then we also are forwarding that letter to Debbie Wasserman on the previous item. The money that we save, Nancy, the money that we save by getting the grant money, will that money only be earmarked to other infrastructure projects?
So as you're aware, the way that we put money into the community investment plan comes from different pots, and the money that is currently allocated for tidal valves comes specifically from the stormwater fund. So any savings that we might experience would be within the stormwater fund itself, specifically related to the tidal valves.
Okay, so what happened? Okay, so that doesn't really answer my question. Can that money be spent in any department in the city if we get the money?
No,
No.
because the savings would specifically be in the stormwater fund. And so we could then choose to do other stormwater projects because we would have that savings in the stormwater fund itself.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. That's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Okay, so we're on general discussion and comments by committee members. I have one or two things. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up under this agenda item? Hearing no one, I'll do my comments. I think, Anisha, maybe you can answer this. At the last meeting, or maybe a previous meeting, the ITF said that they'd like to see a list of developments that have paid impact fees. Is that in, do you know if that's in the works, Anisha?
That has been requested through DSD. Let me check with Pauline to see if there's been any progress. I don't believe it has because I haven't received anything as of yet.
Okay.
I do know we did reach out to DSD for that list.
Okay.
Pauline, did you receive anything from them?
No, I have not.
Okay, so
We'll follow up.
Anisha,
this is just by way of reminder then.
Anisha, that's an ongoing list, so it should be readily available by DSD. They shouldn't recreate anything, or it's already in place.
Well, I reached out to, I don't remember who I reached out to, the name of the person, but I wasn't able to get a list. So if you have a list or you can get a list, that would be helpful, and we can have it for the next meeting.
I'll talk to Pauline about where to get it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And in that same vein, Peter, with the impact fees.
Yeah.
At the absolute, I think it was included in the background materials. There's a proposed bill in Tallahassee that would materially affect municipalities' ability to collect impact fees. And it would also require municipalities to credit developments for any improvements to public infrastructure that they make against the impact fee. Now, my understanding is that if, for instance, a developer has to put in a new piece of sewer line from his development to, let's say, the pump station, and he actually makes that improvement, that is not credited currently against the impact fee that he is required to pay. But my understanding of the bill, and I could be wrong, and Anisha, Raj tells me you are familiar with this, This bill, if it was passed, would materially change that, and any improvements that were required, site-specific improvements required, would now be deducted from the impact fee. And there's a lot of buzz all around the state regarding this, because that will materially impact the amount of money that you can charge to or collect in impact fees, which are not supposed to be site-specific. They're supposed to be to improve the system to cope with the extra capacity, and not to be site-specific so that the development can proceed. Anisha, Raj tells me you've been talking to our lobbyists about that. Do you have any update on that?
I don't have any update on that, but we can definitely, I can get you something back, and I can probably try to send something before the next meeting, but I don't have any additional updates on that.
Okay, well, I think, did I give that, I gave that bill to you, didn't I? And it was included in the materials?
I
Yes.
don't recall seeing, did you?
I think it was at the very back.
Yes, it's Senator Gruter's bill, is that correct? And there's there's some questions about that that are asked and answered among the backup.
Okay, well, you can see on the screen now that she put it up. Okay, so I don't know whether or not our lobbyists our city lobbyists are going to be weighing in on this, or if the city is actually weighing in on this. I don't know whether or not they are, but I just wanted to make everybody aware of it, because there are other municipalities and other groups throughout the state that are very concerned about this and are opposed to this bill, because it will reduce the amount of money that one can charge development for the impact fees. And there's also other things in there, because the legislature is very concerned about the municipality's ability to charge impact fees. And every year they seem to chip away at it, make it, some people would say more difficult, and some people would say more transparent and reasonable. Depends on which side you are on this issue. But I wanted to bring,
yes. I'm sorry that I don't have the information. If there were other House bills and Senate bills that I actually have been working with our internal House staff on, but this one I actually haven't been as involved on, but I will definitely get a little bit more well-versed on it, because you're right, there could be substantial impact, financial impacts associated with it. But there were other House bills and Senate bills that I was actually being more engaged on that could have detrimental impacts to our operation and how we do business going forward with different aspects of our solid waste systems, as well as our public works systems.
Okay, at the next meeting, could we just talk about that a little bit? Because the session is going to be over at the end of the month.
Okay.
And it may be that there are things that we want to express an opinion upon after the session, and we'll see. So if we can put that on the agenda for next month, like a review of bills in Tallahassee that impact our infrastructure and our ability to fund and build infrastructure.
Okay. I can definitely do that. There were quite a few, so I can definitely do that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Where were we? We were on comments from members. Peter.
So I have some questions and possibly some information on funding issues, both relating to probably stormwater and transportation. Now, I see under new business on the agenda, there's an item about new funding opportunities. So I don't know if, Chair, you'd prefer me to leave these comments until that point. I'm not quite sure what's intended by that item.
Yeah, would I ask you, Peter, to please do that? Because we have to get through a lot of material now. And actually, the two things that we've just been talking about should have probably gone back on the funding, new funding opportunities, but got them out of order. So I would like very much to get back into order. Charlie?
Can I comment on the item we just went through, this bill on impact fees?
Yeah.
I just, one thing of note that I don't think many people realize is the county traffic impact fees at this point are pretty damn big, that are being charged to every project that's get built in Fort Lauderdale. We have a 30,000 square foot building, and I think the county fee was $200,000.
That's money.
It's a lot of money. And we made some inquiries a couple of years ago about how the county was spending those traffic impact fees. And from what I understand, a lot of the money is used to support the bus system, which is really not what impact fees should be about. It should be about infrastructure. So just something to keep in mind when we look at these fees. It's not just the city fees, but the county fees as well,
Right.
that the developers are paying and that the city is not getting its fair share of.
It's a very good point, because one of the things in the bill that we were just talking about is a provision that would require municipalities and special districts, and I think also counties, to actually give an accounting of where the money has gone. And so that may be an attempt on the part of the legislature to address some of these issues that you bring up. You're right. We're supporting the bus system with that money. Now, they'll say they're buying buses and they're buying, terminals and things like that, and not paying salaries. So that's what they will say.
Think of the fees that have been raised in the downtown development in the last 15 years. It's massive. And the county fees are significantly higher than the cities.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay. All right. So let's then can we move on then to our to the main item on the agenda, which is old business, the continued discussion of the moratorium. Is that okay with everybody? Are we ready to go there?
Yep.
Public
Okay. Yes.
comment.
Yes,
Chair.
go right ahead, Peter.
Is there something under public comments, or nobody from the public is on?
Pauline, do we have any public people on?
So no one has signed up to speak this far.
Okay, thank you. That doesn't mean nobody's listening. It means nobody signed up to speak.
We actually have one individual, Peter Hitchen-Bleichner, who signed up to speak.
Oh, we do. Did he indicate what item he wanted to sign up to speak under?
No.
No. All right, then if he hasn't got any particular item, I think we need to get onto our agenda, and then we'll get back to Peter. Okay. All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the Attorney Spence is on, and I think when you and I spoke, you said that you would take him out of turn.
Yes, I will take him out of turn because he needs to go somewhere today. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction to this item, which you don't need because we've been talking about this for a long time, but we need to focus on responding to our very specific charge from the commission, which was to determine whether or not there was going to be, and I'll just read it, it's the best thing to do, evaluate and provide a recommendation on the feasibility and impact of implementing a moratorium on the acceptance of an application for the issuance of development permits. So that's the charge. So one of the very first things I asked, and we should have probably started here a couple of months ago, is why don't we get a copy of the ordinance that describes what kind of analysis the city does prior to the issuance of a development permit. Now, we've been talking around this. We looked at the spreadsheet, we looked at issues of capacity and condition, but let's sort of, in order to focus our minds and to focus our response, take a look at the actual zoning legislation. So could you put that legislation, that ordinance up on the screen? Pauline, please. And while she's doing that, the reason I asked Mr. Spencer to be with us today is because when he spoke with us about moratoriums and whether or not they were possible to do and the implications, he mentioned something about that there was a connection between any moratorium that you would propose and the comprehensive plan. And I wanted to make sure we understood, we understood, could be able to ask him any questions about that particular piece of the puzzle, so to speak. So what you have in front of you here, this is the actual ordinance. And this is what the city staff does as an analysis when there is a development permit. And if you could move it up a little bit, Pauline. Okay, can we make it a little bigger?
Is that about a size 6 font?
It was better previously. If we could make it a little bigger. That's better.
Just a little bigger. How about a little more?
That's better.
Oh, nice.
That's
Okay,
X really good.
get it right in the middle there. All right, if you go back to the top again. Okay, we start here at the top. So these are the sort of subject matter, okay? We talk about communications networks. We're not talking about that. They're talking about drainage facilities. That's not something that we're talking about now because that's just not the kind of thing that we were involved in. Sensitive lands, we don't do that either. Can you keep going up a little bit? Or down, rather? Fire protections, we could stop at fire protection, okay? They have to do an analysis, stop, of whether fire protection will be adequate. So we did have a presentation about fire, adequacy of fire. If you all recall, the city now has a very robust program of looking at all the fire hydrants. They've actually found all the fire hydrants, and they now have an ongoing program of looking at them and testing them and making sure they all have the appropriate amount of pressure. Am I recalling this correctly, Anisha?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay, so one could probably say that they have the fire protection issue well in hand, or one could not, depending upon your perspective. But I just wanted to go through the ordinance to see what we have learned about the items that are in the ordinance that are pertinent to the discussion. The next one is parks and open space, okay? We collect park impact fees. We got $200 million to build parks. I don't think parks is an issue, although I'm open for a discussion about, do we need a moratorium because we don't have enough parks? I don't know if anybody wants to even go there or needs to go there. Let's think about that. I'm just putting it all out. The next one is police protection. So whenever there's a development application, they call the police department and they tell them whether there's going to be adequate police protection. We're building a new police station. We should have enough money to buy cameras and things like that. I personally don't see any issue with police protection, but I'm open to anybody else who sees it differently. Anybody see that we need to be more concerned about the ability of the city to provide police protection?
Keep going.
Okay, moving along. Potable water. Can we go up a little bit? Potable water. Now, obviously, this is a big one, okay? Adequate potable water shall be provided for the needs of the proposed development. Okay, and I don't know whether we are in a position to say that there is adequate water being provided, capacity for new development. That's one that I think we need to look at a little more, and I'm going to come back to it, but I'm going to just go over it so we get the whole picture, right? Potable water facilities, can we please go up a little bit? Okay, so this is more about potable water, and then the next one is sanitary sewers, okay? The system is tied into the sanitary treatment facility. The available capacity shall be determined, et cetera, et cetera. This is what they do when they do the spreadsheet. They do both of these. They do water and they do sanitary sewer. That's really all they do on that spreadsheet. Can we keep going up? Schools we don't get involved in. Stop. Solid waste, we're not getting involved in solid waste. That's a contract with, a private entity. Transportation facilities, oh, let's stop here. Okay. We're not getting into, we have never gotten into transportation facilities. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying we have never looked at, is there adequate transportation facilities? I don't even know where we would start on that one, but we haven't even, aside from last week when we started to talk about the projects that were part of the surtax program, we have not really gotten into traffic and transportation and public transit, et cetera, and road capacities, levels of service on the roads. We have never done anything like that. And I don't know that we want to, but I'm just showing you that given the ordinance that is the subject that we're supposed to be looking at, we are really only looking at potable water and sanitary sewers. Are we all on the same page on that? Can we go up a little more and see if there's anything else?
That's
And-
correct.
Chair Mamano, you
Yeah.
missed stormwater, and that's one of the considerations we always talk about.
Okay, well then let's go back to stormwater. Let's go back to stormwater. Here we go. And it says adequate stormwater facilities and systems shall be provided so that the removal of stormwater shall not impact adjacent streets and properties in accordance with Florida building engineer standards, yada, yada, yada. Okay, you're right. You're absolutely right. We've spent a great deal of time on the stormwater management plan. But, and I don't know, and that's a good question to ask, when they do these analyses of adequacy, how do they determine if the stormwater system is adequate to provide for that? Okay, I know they do potable water and I know they do sewage, but I don't see any analysis that they haven't shown us, any analysis of how they analyze whether or not there's an adequate stormwater system. And they've never showed us if there's, how they do the analysis, if the traffic facilities are appropriate. These, I think, are questions that we need to have clear so that when we go to the commission and say, this is our recommendation, and they say, well, how did you come up with this recommendation? We
Why
have
are
to
we,
say, well, we looked at all of these things that are part of the ordinance, or we looked at the following things that are part of the ordinance, and that's how we came to our conclusion.
why are we going to get into traffic, Marilyn? Because I
I-
know that for projects, as it relates to traffic, they have criteria based on the
I can give you an answer on storm.
number of trips at any particular progressiveness of the evaluation by the city.
Okay, can we just, I'll be right back, Charlie. Let me just go with Jacqueline Scott a minute, because that brings up the level of service issue, okay? There are standards when they do a traffic analysis that, you know, a development will not cause a street to go from service level A to service level D or something like that. And that brings me back to Spence, okay? And the levels of service of all of these things are described in our comprehensive plan. So I want to get him to opine if he thinks it's appropriate on the relationship between the comprehensive plan, which establishes the levels of service, okay, for all these things, and the development review process. What happens if one of these projects bumps that level of service? Okay, is that a trigger to deny an application for a development permit? So if you would
I
indulge me,
don't,
can we get?
well, you're
can we
asking
get-
Spence this, but I was trying to,
Yeah, I'm asking Spence if that is something we should be concerned about, okay? Because he did mention when he discussed moratoriums in general, that there was a relationship to the comprehensive plan. And I want to get clear in our minds, my mind, our minds, if we have any concerns, is there something about these levels of service that are determined in the comprehensive plan and the ability of the city to issue development permits? So, Mr. Spence?
Good afternoon. Can
Hi.
you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Oh, wonderful.
I may not be articulating this, you know, as clearly as I should.
No, I
but,
understand
I
I understand the question that's being asked. But
Good.
for context, the state of Florida's Community Planning Act requires that each municipality and county adopts a comprehensive plan. A part of that adopted comprehensive plan requires certain elements that help to guide future development and growth within the city. And capital improvement elements are part of that. Those particular elements require the municipality to consider the location of public facilities, the efficient use of those facilities, and also to set parameters for the levels of services for those services provided. Why that's important is the state statute also limits the ability for local governments to issue development permits that aren't consistent with the comprehensive plan. And then I've kind of jumped steps because what ends up happening is that municipalities adopt land use regulations, our ULDR, Unified Land Development Regulations, that are consistent with our comprehensive plan. And the items that you are going through now are those elements that help us to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. When I discussed the criteria for a moratorium with you all, there was one particular criteria that I spoke of, that the moratorium ordinance needs to be appropriate to the development of the comprehensive plan, meaning that the moratorium must relate to specific planning studies and the enactment of appropriate ordinance to implement the remedies. And the comprehensive plan is that planning tool that the city uses. And back when, before the state amended the Community Planning Act, every 7 years, the planning staff would go through an evaluation and appraisal that would include professional data to look at things like infrastructure and make amendments to the comprehensive plan and the way that we issue development permits. And so to further explain that element of the moratorium ordinance, the question is whether or not this moratorium would be appropriate for the development of comprehensive plan elements that would relate back to planning studies and would assist in addressing in good faith whatever need, whatever infrastructure need that has been deemed to be an urgent need requiring the moratorium.
Okay, so let's just take, does anybody have any questions for him on that?
No, but I have a comment on general on transportation.
Yes, sir, certainly, go ahead.
So transportation concurrency is a huge subject in and of itself. And if we get into the nitty gritty, I think it will take many meetings. But put simply, the idea of having highways everywhere that operate at an adequate level of service is antithetical to the development of compact urban forms, particularly a downtown. So it used to be the case, and I'm sort of out of the loop, that a lot of the city was kind of at a maintained standard. It was already level of service D or worse, and developers went and did the studies, and they were just required to do best efforts to maintain the level of service as it was, because you just cannot build enough roads and have a downtown that's starting to look like Fort Lauderdale's is. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, okay, and I think if you look on your screen, under transportation, if Pauline, if you would move the screen just a little bit further over to the left, okay, just a little bit to the left, it says, I'm sorry, the other left, my left. Okay, shall be evaluated on the basis of generalized daily levels of service maximum volumes. And that's what, Peter, I think you were talking about. The level of service on our streets, Federal Highway, for instance, 17th Street, I don't know about Broward Boulevard, but probably true. They're all at service level F already, okay? So if they're all at service level F, and the comprehensive plan says that you should be having a certain level of service for your roads, does that impact the way the staff reviews a development permit? That's a question back to, I think, Spence.
Well, while he's thinking about that, let me just say, what happens is, in my experience, the developer provides the study, and it shows, if it's F, it can't be any worse than F. You could literally double the amount of traffic and it's still level of service F. So all they are asked to do is to do their best, this is a developer, to mitigate that within an immediate area. For example, improving a traffic signal timing or adding a turn lane. They can't do anything about the level of service a mile away except pay their impact fees.
Could I give some input on that?
Sure, Charlie, you probably know this better than anyone.
Yeah, the way it's handled is every project, there may be some cutoff on size, a remodel of an office space or something, but anything that goes to a DRC, I believe, has to submit a traffic statement from a traffic engineer. And basically, if you're under 1,000 trips a day, then you can get by with a traffic statement, which is basically that the project has minimal impact. 1,000 trips a day sounds like a lot, but it's really not much when you think about 24 hours. If the project has more than 1,000 trips a day, then a full-blown traffic study is done, which identifies deficient areas. And then there's answers to how to deal with those deficient areas. There's also another concept, it's called a compact deferral area, which is mentioned in this code, which is what deals with areas where the level of service is below, I believe it's below D. And as I understand it, and again, a traffic engineer would have more details, I think you have to maintain a level D with your project, no matter what. So as Peter said, some of these projects come in order to keep the service level at D. For instance, the Whole Foods at 17th Street and Federal, they did several improvements to the area. They extended the left turn lane on northbound Federal Highway to provide more capacity for that left turn lane. I think they made some median changes on 17th Street. They may have put in a turn lane into their facility that's off of 17th. And I believe they eliminated cuts on Federal Highway. So it gets pretty complex with the traffic studies. Our project, for instance, on Federal Highway had to do a traffic study. And then on top of that, if you're on a state road, you also have to get DOT permits for anything you do that affects the roadway. So our project on Federal Highway, we're closing a bunch of curb cuts. So as a result, the DOT reviewed our plans, and they've got us extending the left turn lane at Federal and 6th as part of our project that's on that northwest corner. So it's a pretty detailed analysis that they get into of any project of size, and there's quite a bit of work put on it. It's not just sloughed off, I guess would be my best explanation.
Thank you, Charlie. But FYI, the people on the Whole Foods on Federal Highway, they didn't do any of those things. They didn't do a dedicated lane. They didn't do a turnoff lane. They didn't do anything. So
I watched them do it, Marilyn. I watched them do the turn lane work on Federal Highway myself. I own a building behind Burger King, so I'm down there all the time.
the turn lane was always there.
No, they extended it.
Oh, extended it. Okay. So
Yeah,
there's
in other words, there was
backup in the
more
extension.
There was
More
more
backup in
storage.
it.
There was more storage for cars that want to make a left turn on northbound Federal Highway. They added to that capacity.
Okay.
They added stacking, correct?
Correct.
Right, by just putting the arrow to the left-hand turn further back.
No, the median had to be rebuilt and there was more pavement installed.
Okay,
It came out of the landscape item.
great. Okay,
The good point, if I may interject something, is the fact that it's just not only city, but it's state and county coordination, such as federal with state, the county with like Cypress Creek Road and
Third
and
Avenue.
things like.
Mhm.
So
It's a
there
nightmare.
is coordination required in these things. So you can make improvements on the city streets, but then you're impacted by the adjoining contiguous state and county roads.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And what the craziest part is, we do all these improvements in the right of way. So for instance, up there, quarter deck
Yeah,
on 17th, we did a bunch of improvements along, I think that's 15th or 16th that goes up the
16th.
hill.
yeah,
You know, I put in sidewalks, curbing,
yep, yep.
et cetera. We, not only did I have to do the work, I had to post a bond for the cost of the work that the city keeps for a year. And then you have to enter in maintenance agreements that says that if anything needs to be done to maintain those sidewalks, we're the ones that pay for it. So we're building infrastructure for the city and we're the ones that get to take care of it.
So can
So
I, yeah, go on. I'm sorry, I
It's a
didn't
real-
need to.
It's a real treat.
It's a real treat.
You should
Okay.
thank him, Marilyn.
Yes, I did, and I love that building. It's a very lovely building, and we very much love our quarter deck. Everybody
It
loves
turned
their
out
quarter deck.
nice. And you
It
know, the
did.
shame is that project or that shopping street is owned by multiple owners.
Yeah,
So that parking lot needs to be upgraded in the worst way. The lights don't work half the time and the parking lot's falling apart. And the
Yeah,
owners
it's a
can't
shame.
agree to spend the money to upgrade it. It's just a damn shame. That could be so much nicer, that entire little
Yeah.
run there.
but the outside looks good. The perimeter looks good. The trees are nice. We're very happy, Charlie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so getting back to where we are here in terms of this analysis, when we go to the commission and say, we looked at, there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and F. I think we have to be able to be in a position to say that we only looked at stormwater, sewerage, and water in any great
and-
depth.
And could I talk about storm for a minute?
Sure,
Just to give you guys a little more background on how that works.
sure, sure.
The way the storm works is it's really governed by the county. It's actually, the county issues a surface water management permit. It's a pretty protracted process. And what happens is the civil engineer submits a permit application to the county with details on the project and the amount of stormwater that it creates, and calculations that you can keep all that stormwater on your property. So the way the commercial projects are done almost universally today is because the land's so valuable, there's a drain put in that's like a pipe with holes in it that has rock around it. It's called a French drain.
Yep.
I think it's the first inch of water or the first 2 inches of water that go onto that property, go through that French drain, and by the civil engineer's calculations, have to be absorbed into the ground through that French drain. So the water goes in the pipe, it goes through the little holes, it filters through the rock and goes into the groundwater. The overflow for that then is normally handled in these bigger projects, anything really over a half an acre, with a deep injection well. And that's a big well that they drill 125 feet deep, and the water gets injected directly into the aquifer. So if you drive around, for instance, when we had all the flooding in October, if you look at any project that's been built in the last 15 years, generally they were dry as a bone because these wells took all the water and the property's drained. On smaller projects, the city's also gotten very aggressive. Like at a house, you see expansive French drain systems put in to take the water and either to go into the swale and to go into the swale to take all the water that a residential lot gets. So stormwater, really every project that gets rebuilt in our city actually improves our ability to take stormwater and get rid of it and not pump it into a street system or into the rivers or the intercoastal.
Marilyn, if I may
Yeah, Ralph?
follow up.
Yeah, Ralph.
Yes, Charlie's right. I mean, with the French drain, or they're called exfiltration systems.
Trenches.
Basically, the water goes into a catch basin, and then it exits and on site at the
When
individual
you go north,
catch basins
drop this.
with the slotted pipe, exfiltration rock, and filter fabric, and then it exits out, and then it percolates down into the groundwater.
Mhm.
The other major storm drain system is what they call the positive drainage. And that basically is the stormwater is collected just like as the exfiltration system. And then it goes into a piping system and then ultimately into a collector pipe that goes to an outfall structure. Hopefully they have pollution abatement systems at the end at the where it's discharged either into a canal, lake, or a dry retention area. So those two. The problem that I see with the city is that in a lot of areas that have the exfiltration with the slotted pipe and the exfiltration rock and fabric around it where it discharges out, unfortunately, and the Broward County had the same problem with these, that after about 10 or 15 years, debris gets in them and clogs up the exfiltration capability. Thus, the system essentially becomes a holding tank. I hate to use that term, but
Well, and I got news for you. The city's figured that out, and now we're having to recertify these systems on a timely basis.
yeah, I just sent a email with information. I guess, and I copied Pauline and Anisha. May want to provide that to our members, and so they can see the different types and the problems associated. Well, the main thing is that the street flooding, and of course I guess was it about 10 years back, and they're always modifying the 50-year storm and 100-year storm, which is getting more and more critical. In other words, it's more, it's harder to meet those that criteria. But essentially, what they have to do with the exfiltration is have to dig up the areas where the slotted pipe is and the rock is, and dig it up and replace it to restore that. And like I said before, it's about every 10 to 15 years this type of maintenance is required. The city in the past has just been vac pumping out the structure, which hasn't been addressing the problem. It's only then, like I had said before, a holding tank.
Are you talking about private properties?
No, I'm talking about in the city right away.
Okay, because the private properties, almost everything built today in the last 10 years goes onto a deep injection well.
Well, I'm talking about the city's right away. I'm not getting into private property.
Yeah, the city dumps them all into the intercoastal at the end. Basically, that's where it goes. Right?
Well, not all. It's just those areas in the coastal area, but further inland, it's the exfiltration type. But nevertheless, there needs to be an overview of the storm drain system, because they have the maintenance problems. They also have to contend with the increased 50-year storms, which is getting more and more significant than before, because they're finding that the criteria that was once used is inadequate for today's design standards.
Well, wouldn't it be accurate to say that private development, which is what we're worried about, there's no issue on storm with private development? And I would maintain that there are many privately owned properties for which storm systems haven't been installed, especially, for instance, in the Flagler area. And every time one of these projects is redeveloped and the proper storm systems are put in to take both the roof drainage and the drainage on the periphery, the system's actually improved, because it's less load that's put on these road networks for the city system to try to take.
I agree.
Yeah,
And,
I agree
and
with
then
that.
also, as you mentioned, Charlie, what's important, and we discussed this a couple of years back when they had the city gave a presentation with one of their consultants, is the fact that the city does an excellent job in providing a reshaping of the swales so that the water can sheet flow off the roadways into the swale with an invert and then percolate down, and that helps tremendously. The private properties, I noticed, had a lot of these what you call French drains. Some did have outfalls into canals, but they didn't have really any pollution control structures before it discharged out. So there's, two areas, but yeah, it's many little systems there that have to be looked at depending on if they're inland or coastal or on private property.
The only issue with private development is arguably the current standard has not kept up with what Ralph was alluding to, the increased intensity of the storms.
Peter, they have. They've raised the levels repeatedly to where we're now building. I just finished a parking lot that's 2.5 feet above street level because that's the minimum level the county allows.
I'm talking about it's in this ordinance here, the inch an hour over the whole site or 2.5 inches over the impervious area. That standard's been the same for a good number of years now.
Well, that 2.5 inches is not what this county looks to. They look for that water to be treated, the first 2 inches. But our takeaway capacity with the deep injection wells far exceeds that, far exceeds it. And almost every project that's built in east of 95 today has deep injection wells.
Charlie, how deep are those private deep injection wells?
Generally, they're 125 feet. Sometimes they go deeper to get the flow.
Well, they're going down into the
to the aquifer.
Biscayne aquifer.
Correct.
And I'd be concerned about a lot of those parking lots that have oil and everything off that go down, get washed in.
That's the purpose of the French drain. The French drain is there, or the exfiltration trench is there to treat the first inch that supposedly contains those oils. The only thing that goes directly into the well is roof outfall. If you have roof water, you can go directly into the well and you don't have to go through the exfiltration system. But all parking lot drainage goes first through the exfiltration system, where the theory being that the first inch or 2 inches sits in the exfiltration trench, and then it goes into the well. And the well is actually positioned with a weir so that the water level has to first fill up that French drain system before it then goes to the well. So there's a lot of money spent on this stuff, and it's really gotten very advanced as to how basically the commercial and apartment buildings treat their water.
Okay, can I ask Jerry? Jerry, you were the one who said that we looked at stormwater a lot, and given this discussion about the city's stormwater management plan, its new requirements for treating stormwater, is stormwater one of the items we want to continue to say that there's an issue with and we have to review? Jer?
We're always going to look at stormwater, but I'm listening to this with an ear toward to the answer to the question of the moratorium. Does the city adequately assess these factors when they're deciding to build something or renovate something or add to the infrastructure, such that it doesn't overtax, such that development doesn't overtax the system? And I think there's more than enough evidence here. And Charlie has done an excellent job of convincing everybody that he doesn't have enough pockets for all the hands that want to reach into them.
I got pants with no pockets, baby.
So I think, this is great evidence to say, hey, look, why would you do a moratorium? Well, you don't have to do a moratorium. They're already taking care of all of the things that are required to look at. The only question that remains open in my mind, and I'd ask you all to consider, is, okay, once you made these assessments, then what do you do? Right? What? Okay, so you say no, you don't issue the permit, you ask for more money. Where's the existence evidence that says they actually do something, given the fact that they do a thorough analysis?
The way it works is this stuff is caught in the DRC, which the DRC is done for any building over 4,000 square feet. And generally the city tries to push you into a DRC for even smaller buildings. You cannot get the DRC sign off until you've addressed these items. Most of them are picked up by engineering. And then when engineering issues the permit, they'll issue either you've dealt with these things or you will have dealt with these things before you get a CO. So it's very diligent, and you're not going to get through the process unless you're doing it, and you're not going to get a CO and finish the building unless you've done what you agreed to do. And I can give you a myriad of examples of that process, but it's real. I mean, it's very real. I mean, and if you ask me my opinion on the moratorium, the bigger issue is capacity and impact on the sewers. I mean, that if you were looking at our weak point as a city, that's where it is.
Okay. Did somebody throw the agenda up again? Was that, or is that just my screen? Is everybody seeing the agenda again?
No.
That was my screen. I stopped sharing.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I was trying to communicate. That's what I made. I didn't know if it was going to show on the screen.
Could we please put that piece that was previously up again, because that's the meat and potatoes of what we need to tell the commission. That we have looked at the following items, all A, B, C, D, E, and given what we have learned about A, B, C, D, E, there is a problem or there isn't a problem, or there is a bit of a problem that needs addressing. So I think Charlie has said it very well, that given all of the items here, the one that we really need to be sure about is stormwater and potable water, which if you just go up, if you scroll down, so we get closer to the top. I'm sorry, what I meant is go further to the top. Solid waste, no, keep going. Sanitary sewers and, stop. Okay, let's start with water, okay? Now, water, we have talked about in terms of the treatment plant, okay? We're fixing the existing treatment plant. There's money in the budget for it. The project is well into design and on its way. And we are well along the way of looking at replacing the water treatment plant. To me, the problem that I see with water is that we have not done as comprehensive analysis on the pipe system of water that we have done on sewers. We started that. If you recall, we started, I don't know who it was on the staff who was making the presentation. I think his name was Rob. He is working on, Rick is working on an analysis of the piping system comparable to or in the spirit of what Hazen did with the sewer system. Did I remember that correctly, Anisha?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I was on mute. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he actually showed us a map. There was a map that he was working on that was mapping the entire.
I'm not sure it was a map, but he talked about a task order that he has with a company called WGI. And as a part of the water consent order, he's actually working on mapping our water system right now. So that's a project that is underway.
And didn't he also produce a map that showed where the water breaks were?
Yes.
Well, that's the monthly map that we provide you, but that was different from that. But yes, he is working on a mapping system for and it is in regards to the consent order. So we have to get it done. I'm not quite sure because I can't remember right now if it was 18 months or I don't want to say because I don't remember specifically off the top of my head, but there's a time frame and there's also a plan that we're preparing to be in compliance with, to be consistent with AWWA standards, but we're actually doing something a little bit more robust than what they have. Because I believe it's every 5 years that you have to touch every pipe, and we're actually preparing something to exercise a little bit sooner than that. I believe you said every 2 years.
Right, well, that's the exercising of the valves in the system, not the condition of the pipes in the system.
Right, that's the exercising of the valves, but the other piece of it is identifying where all of those pipes and all those valves are. And so that's what he's working on.
Okay, so Anisha, just for the sake of the argument, if we were to say we need a moratorium, and the reason we need a moratorium is that we don't have a handle on the entire potable water system. I'm not saying we're going to say that. I'm just saying theoretically.
Okay.
I mean, what we need to do is we need to have a lot of data and information. the most up-to-date information we have about the potable water system. So is there some way we can put together a narrative, for instance, of what is the, what are we currently doing to make sure that the potable water facilities are adequate for new development?
Yes, we can definitely put something on it. And I can actually have, as part of the Public Works report going forward, I can make sure I bring a status update of that progress that we're working on.
Okay, but can we do that like for the next meeting? Because we got to,
Yes,
do
that's what I'm referring
this.
to.
Yes,
Yes,
thank
I'm
you,
referring
thank
to.
you. Peter?
But Chair, I think you're correct that the issue is the condition of the pipes.
Yeah.
I think that the water transmission system is quite at the same level of knowledge of condition as now we have from the Hazen and Sawyer report on the sewers and force mains. And we have evidence, of course, that water mains, as well as some sewers, are continuing to break. The consequences in my mind are less dire, but they are breaking nonetheless, maybe because they're old or whatever it might be.
You're absolutely right, Peter. And I think the difference in our state of knowledge of the water system versus the sewer system is significant. We know significantly more about the sewer system because of the consent order and because of the work Hazen and Sawyer's doing and because of the work that the staff is doing. We're probably in a better position to say we have looked at the condition, capacity of the sewer system and the process that the staff goes through to determine if there's adequate capacity, because we have a lot of data. We may not think that they're doing as good a job as they should, or there's some tweaking that has to go on. But I think that we have tremendous amount of material on the sanitary sewer system.
Chair
But we don't
Romano?
have, yes.
I was going to agree with you. That is correct. Because we have pretty close to completion of the mapping of the system. And actually, as you mentioned, the condition of the system with the likelihood of failure or the consequent of failure, and not having that information on the water system. That is one of the things that Raj has actually spoke of, and making sure that we do push more money towards the water system. So with the next tranche of 23, that next $200 million, he has pushed us to make sure that more money goes towards the water side so that we can actually be a little bit more ahead on that. But the first step is the mapping, which is what we're doing.
Excellent, excellent. Ralph, you had a question.
He's muted.
Ralph, you're muted. Unmute yourself. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Back? Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Essentially, when we have the knowledge, and the city has done a great job as far as preparing the various force main and water main comprehensive analysis data, if you will, on showing or identifying the old pipe, the type of material, and to determine what the characteristics are as far as their replacement, of eventual replacement. They also learn a lot when they have a water main break, and they take out a section and they find out how tuberculated the inside of the pipe is, the thickness or thinness of the water main pipe because of the deterioration that has occurred over the years. So they do have some information, so they're not totally blind. But getting back to the moratorium, I always thought it was the health department that established the moratorium if the city or municipality could not provide the amount of water necessary to meet the demands.
I think Ralph, it's not the amount, it's the quality.
Well,
The health department, well, we should check that. We should ask that question.
well, the
Does the
quality
health
is, the quality is one thing, but I know in the past, there have been different cities in South Florida that have received a moratorium because they did not have the capacity to provide the water to that. So they could not approve the developers and to for that until they were able to increase their capacity at their water treatment plant. Now, the quality certainly is important too, and I know that the city is kind of on a borderline with having to put in ammonia to get the ammonia with chlorine, which the ammonia actually serves as trying to extend the life or the disinfection of the chlorine further on, but it does have a negative issue after so long that nitrification is created. So they have to do what they're going to start tomorrow for 3 weeks, and that is to have free chlorine and then do flushings at the extremities of the water distribution system to help get that nitrification out, which is, ammonia in itself is very corrosive, but the nitrification also adds to the problem.
Yeah, Ralph, that's very, very true and very important, because I was at the end of one of those lines, and I know the free chlorine situation. But what I'm saying is that in relationship to the moratorium, the staff, when they review a new project, if we go to the spreadsheets that we saw and spend a little more time on those spreadsheets, I would like to know, apropos your question, how do they account for the quality as well as the quantity of water? Because they do analyze the quantity of water. If we, when we go to the spreadsheet, we'll see that there's a column for the capacity of the sewage treatment plant, and there's another column for water. So they are in some way figuring out the capacity of the system to handle water. I don't know that they're doing anything vis-a-vis quality other than saying we meet the standards of the EPA or whoever the regulatory agency is. Peter?
So you've just touched on what seems to be the major issue with both the water transmission system and the sewage transmission system. And that is, all the standards and the review methods are based around the capacity of the system. They barely speak, if at all, to the condition of the system, as exemplified by, in the case of water, maybe water quality, and in the case of sewer, the age of the pipes, etc.
Yes. Anisha?
Thank you, Chairman Romano. 2 things. One, Attorney Spence is still on and wanted to know if there's any additional questions or concerns. If not, he was going to drop off. And then secondly, we do have Paul Shuttles that is on the line and is interested in speaking on the items, on the old business moratorium discussion that you're having right now.
Thank you very much. Let me get to Mr. Spence. Mr. Spence, if I could ask you, in your opinion, given the levels of service in the comprehensive plan, do you believe that the city has, well, let me phrase this a different way. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, we would say we think there should be a moratorium for the following reasons, and there's let's just take potable water, for instance, or transportation, for instance, and say we think there should be a moratorium because the level of service on the roads is already at a level of service F, and more development is just going to mean more deterioration in the level of service. Would that be contrary to the comprehensive plan? I'm trying to see if we were to say, let's have a moratorium, the counter argument would be, but the comprehensive plan deals with that issue, and there's no reason to have a moratorium because it's already dealt with in the comprehensive plan.
So my concern is that it's kind of the cart before the horse type of argument. A moratorium is an extraordinary remedy when there is an emergency circumstance that you want to pause the continued damage that that circumstance would cause in order for you to amend your comprehensive plan and your planning documents in order to create a remedy. So the planning documents, the comprehensive plan and the ULDR have built into them remedies or systems that are supposed to address the issues that you're discussing. A moratorium is appropriate only when the mechanisms that are in place are not sufficient to address the issue. And it amounts to kind of an emergency that you have to stop things in their tracks while you correct and amend the comprehensive plan.
Okay, that's very illuminating. So if we were to say we need a moratorium, okay, we would have to demonstrate that there is an immediate problem. There is an immediate problem.
That's kind of what I'm saying is you don't say we need a moratorium. You say
there's an immediate
problem. This is a problem
that
we need to address right now.
Right.
We can't issue any more development permits because this is such a big problem that if we don't put a moratorium in place, this is going to get out of hand for the city.
Thank you very much. That really gives me focus on what our job is. The commission asked us, should there be a moratorium, when they should have asked us, is there a serious enough problem given the issuance of these development permits and the problems we're having with our infrastructure? Is there a serious enough problem that a moratorium is warranted? Would you say that would be a better way to do it, to express it?
That would be the way that you should evaluate it.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for being with us. I know you're busy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, can I ask us something?
Yes, go. Oh, wait a minute.
Sure.
Wait, before you go.
Sure.
So let's say that the committee concluded that the current analysis of developments does not adequately take account of the condition of certain infrastructure, but specifically water and sewer, and that developments are reviewed needs to be redone so that far more explicit consideration is given to that. Would that then be grounds for saying that we should have moratorium for a period of months while a new review system is developed? The rationale for the moratorium being the time period necessary to completely change the way that developments are reviewed with respect to water and sewer.
So that's where the notion of good faith comes in. So you would need expert testimony to say that a moratorium is warranted under these circumstances to make the corrections or to correct the deficiencies that you've identified. Could that be accomplished without halting the issuance of development permits and not result in a damage that you think the moratorium would subvert or avert? Or would the planning staff be able to make these changes without affecting the issuance of development permits in the interim? So that's kind
of. Let me just briefly give you an answer to that. Basically, the IFS going on years that.
Sorry, you're chopping up a bit.
Yes, can you hear me now? So
yes.
The ITF has asked the staff over a period of probably more than a year to, when we have looked at the way they review.
Oh,
I think we lost you again.
Can you somehow add to this explicit consideration of condition? And I have not seen any evidence that that is happening.
So you cut out, so I don't know what it is that you're referring to. That kind of cut out and then you came back in later on. I don't know if it's your connection or mine. Did everyone else hear?
No, it's Peter's connection. If I could explain it a little bit, I think, and you stop me, Peter. There is currently a process whereby the staff reviews sewer systems based upon the capacity of the system to handle the flow. Specifically, not really even just the size of the pipe, but the capacity of the pump stations to push the flow through, which is another subject we should get into at some point. But they do not explicitly look at the condition. They say we look at the condition, but there's nothing in the documents that say that point to it, because it's not on the spreadsheet. There's no guidelines for how bad a condition is. Now we have more information on condition vis-a-vis Hazen and Sawyer. If we wanted to add that condition analysis to the development review, that might be a reason to have a moratorium until that's added, or it might be a recommendation to get that done with as soon as possible. You see what he's trying? I think that's what he's trying to say.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So for that, you would have to elicit expert testimony that says that there's a demonstrated need to impose a moratorium to address this particular concern, or else such and such damage would result to the overall city.
Okay, that's very important, because you've mentioned substantial expert analysis. Okay, we are not the substantial expert analysis. Our review of the information and our view of the material does not constitute competent professional evidence. We're just a committee. Could we say something to the effect that we think the city should impose a moratorium because we need competent professional analysis of whether or not the condition of the pipes should be actually part of the review process?
You can say that you've identified this particular issue that you believe warrants a moratorium, but based on council's guidance, believes that you need additional expert evaluation to determine whether or not this is sufficient to demonstrate a need for a moratorium.
Okay.
In other words, in your analysis, you've identified that this is a significant concern, and in your lay opinion, you believe this is a sufficient concern to impose a moratorium, but you recognize that courts would require a little more expert evaluation as to whether or not that's warranted.
Well, could we also put it in a different light and say, we have identified this problem or any other problems that we identify, but we recognize that we are not professional engineers and could not provide a professional analysis of how big a problem it is and if the problem is big enough to warrant a moratorium, and we recommend that the city get that analysis?
Yes.
We could do that. All right. Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. Well, thank you again. If anybody else, Jackie, do you have another question for Dwayne?
Yeah, I apologize, Chair, but I have to leave.
Okay.
So do I.
Okay. All right. Fine. We can all be here for the whole meeting sometimes. It's okay.
Thank you.
I don't think we're gonna make any resolutions or anything. So thank you for being here, and
Thank you.
you can always watch it on TV.
You got it. Thanks, Marilyn.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marilyn,
All right.
bye.
Okay, so can we just, thank you, Mr. Spencer. Appreciate your input here. And I think that, I know for me, that's making it a lot clearer than it was previously. So can we now, Pauline, let me suggest that there are two people from the general public. It's already 3:30. Can we just take a pause here and listen to the general public so that they can, get on with their lives, and then we can continue with this discussion? Is that amenable to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so Pauline, you want to bring on the people who are waiting to say something? Pauline?
City moderator?
Yes. Oh, city moderator?
Mhm.
Yes, I'm
Mauricio?
here. Yes,
Okay, Mauricio, we're ready for the people who want to speak.
sure. The only individual that signed up to speak was Peter, and I don't see him on here anymore.
Okay, someone mentioned that there was a Paul who also wanted to speak.
Yes, he was on. He sent me an email stating that he was on waiting.
Okay, do you have him, Mauricio?
I don't see a Paul, but there are a few phone numbers that I cannot recognize. So if Paul, if you're using a phone number, go ahead and hit *9 to raise your hand.
I believe his number starts with 917.
Oh, that's Paul. I see him. Yes. Hello, Paul.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. How are you?
Okay. Well, I'm fine,
Very
thank you.
good.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Anisha, for getting me through. Okay, so a couple of things, and I'm sorry if Mr. Ladd was one of the people that had to leave. And my comments are not specific to Mr. Ladd, but more development in general, which is when we hear from the development community about the capital expansion fees that they are now paying, I'm just going to remind everybody that we had the single biggest development boom in the history of this city for 10 years, and we didn't have any raising of the fees since 2009. They were raised in 2019, effective 2020. So just you know, they might be paying some development fees now, but they certainly had a wonderful decade. The second thing I'm going to remind everybody is that some of those fees are taken for transportation and buses. Every time we put up a fancy condo, you actually need people to work in that condo. And there are 10 million people in Broward per Broward County Transit that actually take a bus every year. So those kind of people, they kind of need the transportation to get there. So if we're paying development fees to get people to come to work, then I think that's a good deal. Switching now to the moratorium, as you know, I'm not in favor of moratorium, but I do have two things. Number one, there were consecutive meetings where you were talking about, you were just discussing potentially communicating to the city about incorporating the condition in the DRC. And I just heard your recent comments a few minutes ago. You obviously have a whole host of resources that support that, culminating in the Hazen and Sawyer June 2020 report to the city. In addition to that, it's a natural evolution. The original water and sewer capacity letter was the first in a step. It wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And so when that was introduced by former P&Z member Glassman, now Vice Mayor Glassman, that was intentional as a first step, and we need to build on that step. We now know, we've actually known for years, Public Works and engineers at this city have been writing reports about capacity issues for well over a decade. We have 2 10-year master plans that have addressed the capacity constraints of our system as well. And then you have the more recent ones. It is a missed opportunity if we do not incorporate the condition assessment as part of that review process with Public Works. So I'm imploring you to please consider doing that, whether that's part of your recommendation to the commission or whether that's a communication to the commission to discuss ahead of your report to the commission. And so thank you very much, Chair, for your time and for everybody for serving. And I will hang up unless you have any clarification or everything's good.
Anybody want a question? I have a question for Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's mostly thank you, Paul.
No,
have a great day.
Wait, stay, Peter. Peter, what do you want to ask him?
Can you hear me? I had to stop the video. So tell me, Paul, how you view capacity relative to condition, because you used the word almost throughout what you said, capacity.
Yes.
And
very good. Let me give you.
We
Sure.
are
I'll give you an example.
major capacity issues. Condition is different. So tell me how you see those two things combined.
Okay. Yes, I think they're very combined, and let me tell you why. You can have a sewer basin, you can have a sewer or a pump station, and then you can have the pipes. A pipe, as an example, let's say it's an 8-inch pipe or a 16-inch or a 48-inch. you can deduce that there is capacity. However, if you don't have the condition of the pipe, then you can have all the capacity in the world, but if the pipe breaks, you're done. Okay? So in Rio Vista, we had the capacity. We did not have the condition that was conducive to continuing to send the sewage through the pipe. It happens all over the city. We have a litany of sewer basins where we have identified poor condition, where we may have the capacity using the mathematical calculation. I'm not going to get into your world or Mr. Zeltman's world, but there's one thing to determine that a pipe has the capacity. It's another, or a pump station has the capacity. It's an entirely different thing to know that the actual physical transmission system is in the condition well enough to continue to transmit, whether it's the water or the sewer. Now, we have had so many different reports, and every report since the consent order has become more and more and more specific and done a greater and greater job at identifying. And then, of course, when the people that want to talk about a moratorium, they're concerned with the risk. And I'm assuming that you're all well aware that the moratorium was a strategy. It was to move the city in an aggressive way to meet in the middle. And so I'm hoping that the city does move in the middle to the middle and does incorporate condition and capacity, because that way we mitigate the risk, whether it's the pipes and the sewer basins and the pump stations that are near bodies of water or near areas of significant impact in the city. So that's basically what I mean. Hopefully that was clear.
Paul, let me follow up on that. Given what Attorney Spence just said, we would have to determine that there was through competent professional analysis, that there was a problem, a real problem with the condition of the pipes that would necessitate us to recommend the moratorium. Now,
correct. My counter to that is very simple. Again, me not wanting the moratorium, but me saying to you that if you've got over a decade of public works reports to the Budget Advisory Board, to the CIP, and to the City Commission identifying the condition issues, and then you've got the two different 10-year master plans, then you've got the Reese report, and then you've got the additional reports culminating in Hazen and Sawyer, it would be irresponsible is a word that I can use because I'm a member of the public and I don't quite have the same level of responsibility that you do on that task force. But it seems to me that it would come close to being irresponsible if you did not take the information that you have and incorporate it into making the most informed decision about whether to move forward. So if you have a condition of a pipe that you know to not be up to par, or you have a pump station that you know is operating 24 hours a day instead of 8, or you know that you have a sewer basin that has been identified for 15 years as being on the brink of failure or likelihood of failure, you have that information. It would be almost irresponsible for you not to incorporate that information into your decision-making process. Right now, we specifically don't. We sort of say that we're bordering on starting to think about incorporating it, but we haven't formally done so. And so you as a task force communicating in either a communication or in your report to the commission that one way to alleviate this moratorium concern is to actually be responsible and take these considerations when you're thinking about a development. I think you're meeting everybody in the middle and you're doing the right thing. If you know that there's a problem, you don't want to ignore the problem. You know there's a problem, so deal with the problem. I mean, it's, as you say at the beginning of the meeting, there are millions of dollars being unleashed right now on infrastructure. Okay, nothing to do with politics, just the fact that the faucet is open and the dollars are flowing. And if you have shovel-ready, identifiable that you have projects, then applying for grants and things of that nature is something that you should do, and you should incorporate the condition and capacity into the DRC P&Z process, which would solve a lot of problems.
Well, let me press you a little further on this, okay?
Yes.
The problem has to be immediate and an emergency. Now, we have a map from Hazen and Sawyer that identifies the at-risk pipes and the number of breaks in the at-risk pipes. And we asked Hazen and Sawyer if in the CIP and the consent order, every one of those little red areas where there was a red pipe that
Yep.
they identified as risky, and also where there are breaks, if every one
Right.
of those pieces, segments, was already being addressed in the CIP and the consent order, that does not sound to me like an immediate problem that we could justify a moratorium on. What's your
Except we're
thoughts
going
on
to
that?
inject. So you and I are going to inject the real world, and we know because we've dealt with it that CIP projects get defunded every single year. In addition to that, you know as well as I do that that Rio Vista was in the CIP
For many years.
for a decade.
Yeah.
And so again, the CIP, you know, if this was a budget advisory board meeting, I'd have some pretty nasty words for what the CIP is, but that's a political issue. The CIP isn't as rigorous and as strong as we like to portray it being. It's a very fluid situation, and what's in the CIP last year sometimes just doesn't magically appear this year. And so if you want to use the CIP to couch it, that's fine as long as you make sure that there's a timeline and that everybody is aware, by the way, we specifically didn't have a moratorium on this urgent need because we put in the CIP, and by the way, we're now defunding it. And I mean, you know, you got to babysit it, and you and I are not babysitters.
No, I see your point. I see your point, and I'm trying to anticipate what the counter arguments would be, and accordingly, the counter argument is that you have to have the money lined up and ready to go, and the commitment solid. But my question then becomes:
the consent order was perfect. The consent order was a perfect example. We had the consent order, and then we had Rio Vista. And guess what happened? We reprioritized and re-ranked and the hierarchy of need. And guess what? Rio Vista jumped to the top, and rightly so, right? I mean, it was identified for 10 years. We didn't fix it. Then we obviously had to fix it, and now became an urgent need. And when you've got $248 million, 248 million gallons as your scoreboard, you know, you kind of have the impetus to fix it. But of course, as you know, the money got shifted. And so there are other projects that were originally identified that we kind of put on the back burner for a little bit, and we had to take care of the urgent need. So money shifts. It's a fluid situation. As long as you're making a good faith effort to address it, and the money's not being defunded every 5 minutes, then I think that you can win the public policy debate. I really do.
okay. I appreciate your views on this. Does anybody else have another question for Paul before we let him go? And because what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be looking at an analysis of the pump stations and the conditions of the pipes, the very thing that he's talking about. So you want to just stay on the stay connected, Paul?
I'm gonna watch. I'm addicted to Channel 78. I just can't get enough. Have a great day. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Can we now go, Pauline? Can we go further down on the backup material and get to the one that I think is the most important is the analysis of the pump stations and the analysis of the condition of the pipes. So if you could go all the way down, and let's go past the spreadsheet. If we go past the spreadsheet, yeah, past that, we've seen that, and that's good information. Stop at this particular piece, and this is impact of committed flows on the pump stations. Okay, just bringing it up, and I think actually Paul mentioned one of these pump stations. Is somebody on who can explain what this means? I mean, I could do it, but I'm not the engineer. So from my looking at it, there are some pump stations that are currently running over 8 hours a day, because the legend says what's in pink is over 8 hours a day, and that's no good, right? It seems to me that would be.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct. And you know, if you look at the pump stations and the committed flow, you know, as that represents something of the design, which shows that A-7 is exceeding the design flow capability by 50%, 53%.
Right.
And-
And there's
and-
not 24.8 hours in a day.
Right. There's not 24.8 hours in a day. Correct.
Right.
So
Something is
this
wrong with new.
this is what I was alluding to earlier. They have done an excellent job, and let me take care of this. Is my friend. They've done it. City has done an excellent job in preparing these charts for us to look at. And they points out very obviously those pump stations that are running more than they should. And is it because that their collection system is so bad that they've got so much inflow coming in that this is raising a red flag at these stations? And the cause appears to be is because the basin, the sanitary gravity sewer basins, still have quite a lot of damage in there, allowing the groundwater and sand to enter.
Yeah, but Ralph, it really doesn't matter what the problem, why they're overflowing. It may be infiltration. It may be just too much poop. Okay, we don't know the answer to that
that's
question.
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I said we don't know if it's the damage or it's just overbuilt and we're having more flow coming in than the pump stations were designed at.
Right.
So that's like I said, it raises a red flag. And so we have to look at it in that regards. Okay, let's find out what the problem is. It may be a combination of both the defective gravity sewers and overbuilt.
Right. So
And
look, if I was looking at this, if I was, if I was working as a planner again, and I was, looking at this information, I would not let another building go up in the A7 basin. I would stop until the problem was solved.
Well, and yeah, and you'd have to look at and examine to determine what the cause is for this extra high flows and everything. Could it be that the pump station itself was under-designed and they just haven't upgraded the pumps to handle what the pipe capacity would be able to handle? So,
Right.
There's a number of what if.
Okay, Nancy, you wanted to say something about this? Nancy Gassman, doctor?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. One of the things that we've been doing to improve the resiliency and sustainability of these pump station systems is to put in variable speed pumps. And those pumps are able to run for longer periods of time at much lower RPMs. And that was done well after these regulations went into place. So one of those reasons that Mr. Zeltman is suggesting may be out there for why these pumps are running longer may be because some of these pump stations are the ones that have what are called variable speed pumps, and those pumps will run longer at a lower pumping rate, which saves energy, and it is not necessarily it's in violation of the way the regulations are written, but it's because we've changed the way that the pumps are working. So for some of these systems, what you're seeing there is not necessarily that the systems are overtaxed, but in fact that they are being operated in a different manner than the regulations originally intended.
But you see, Dr. Gassman, when we see copies of analysis of impacts on development, we never see that type of information. Like, this pump station is running longer, but it has these new type of pumps. And this is what I am constantly grasping for, is some more explicit analysis of how new developments impact on infrastructure that has been identified to be at risk. And I haven't yet seen it.
Oscar? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Nancy, you want to answer that? And then we have Omar.
I just to note that for Peter, that he's correct, that this information is not necessarily shared, but it is a reflection of how the city is attempting to respond to these types of issues to improve our pump stations. And with that, I will yield the floor to Omar.
Omar.
Hey, I have drawings on the line. He can give us a quick explanation. He's one of the three guys that work at DSD from Public Works, and he can run over these numbers and let you know how we look at these numbers while we do the capacity letters. Is that okay?
That would be fine.
Okay, go ahead, Ronix.
Afternoon, everyone. As Omar said, my name is Ronix Suarez. I'm with Public Works. So a brief explanation of how these numbers are related to our analysis. The NAPOT is the amount of time that the pumps are running. Now, everybody specifically mentioned pump A7, which is running at approximately 24.8 hours. Now, A7 specifically is working with a variable speed drive that allows the pump to run for longer times. As a matter of fact, if that pump is running at less of a volume, its efficiency is impacted. However, not all the other basins are in that condition. A7 is one of 3 pumps that are running, and that's very specific variation. And we are also looking at the fact that A7 was recently split into 2 basins. There is basin A13 that is being added into our numbers to make sure that we are able to handle new flows into A7 and into A13. Now, as for the duty point and as for the projected NAPOT, the projected NAPOT is a value that we get after we've added all of our committed values. So whenever something comes in, we take these numbers into account and we add it into the values for the pump, saying that this is how long the pump is going to run after we run in, after development happens for X, Y, Z projects. So the current values may not be horrible and the projected values may look a little drastic, but this is also some time away from being realized, considering that these numbers are projections based on what we see coming in.
Okay, Dronix, can I ask you a question then? Let's just
Yes,
stick
ma'am.
with A7 a minute. You're projecting that based upon the spreadsheet of all the development permits that you are now analyze, that if all those projects were built, the projected NAPOT would be 24 hours, 0.8 running of this pump. Is that a problem or is it not a problem?
Currently for A7, it is not an issue. The
Why
reason
not?
it is not an issue, because A7 was recently split into 2 basins.
So now,
A7.
okay. So
And-
if you were to
yes.
redo this chart, you would redo this chart and you would reassign some of that projected flow to another pump station and the number would come down.
Correct. The numbers for projected and for current would go down. However,
Okay.
A7 does have a need to run at a specific value higher just to maintain pump efficiency.
Okay, Ralph?
Yeah, I was going to make a suggestion that possibly those stations that are operating with a variable speed, which is a good way to go because it does save a lot of energy cost. But I would put an asterisk by that. So somebody looking at it, just like we just did, running 12 hours, 24.8, looking at that would think that there's something wrong with an asterisk with a note at the bottom somewhere stating that these are variable pumps that are operating that may distort the length of time versus a constant pumping station system, so that it doesn't confuse folks just like it did us.
Mm-hmm.
So Dronix, can I ask you how this works then? So let's say a development proposal comes in to Department of Sustainable Development. It gets passed to, I think, Dennis Garizgian's group, and then they lift the phone to you and you get involved. Now, is that sort of a summary of how it's working?
I will explain the input of capacity analysis for a new development.
If the DRC applications are coming into sustainable development, how do you get drawn into the analysis of those developments? That's the first question.
Can you repeat that, please?
The development proposals arrive at the Department of Sustainable Development. They need to be analyzed for their impact on the sewage system. How do you become part of that analysis? Someone calls you? Just tell me how that works.
Of course. We generally during DRC, a comment is issued that says capacity analysis is required for this development. This generally happens whenever there's a change in use or a redevelopment of a specific land area. When that happens, whoever it is that's working on that project from the private side fills out the capacity, the water and sewer availability form. Once this is online on the city website, once that is filled out, an automatic email is generated and sent to us with the description and a rough idea of what's going to happen with basic or sometimes very detailed civil plans and an analysis of their perceived demand based on what it is that's going to be built.
Okay, so suppose that you had available to you, which you do somewhere, the Hazen-Sawyer report on at-risk force mains, sewers, and this kind of presentation that we're looking at currently on the runtime of pump stations. If that information is made an explicit part of your analysis and finding, then when you would talk about this pump station is adequate, even though 87 shows as inadequate, you'd have to explicitly say the runtime may on paper be too much, but it has these variable speed pumps. You see, this is the sort of thing that we don't see when we see this analysis and what we're grasping for. It's always just about capacity. It never talks about condition.
Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, you're asking me to what degree of detail do we go in including the actual condition of the pumps or the type of pump that we use in the analysis? Is that accurate so that I can answer your question?
Just make it as simple as this. Let's say you had a development that is going to put additional flow onto that pump station A7, and let's say you are required to attach that Hazen-Sawyer analysis of the current condition runtimes of pump stations to your analysis that goes as backup to that development as it proceeds. Then you would say, yes, it's putting X thousand additional gallons onto this, and yes, Hazen-Sawyer says it's a red, but it has variable speed pumps. And all that would be part of what the commission, the public could see. But all we can see at the moment is everything has sufficient capacity. And I'm asking the staff to look at ways to incorporate all that we know now about the condition, particularly of the sewer and the force mains, into the analysis of developments, and not just say the hole in the ground is big enough to accommodate it.
Okay, so to answer your question, when it comes to purview, when we're doing the analysis is based on our mathematical model that of course is provided by Hazen. Hazen having the information that you are referring to in the reports, they take into account quite a few things whenever we're working on pipes. Now, with that being said, condition of the pipe is not something we are necessarily always aware of, given that there is a lot of pipe in the city and it is difficult to
But the whole thing is, Tronix, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that a lot is known about the condition of the pipes. And this is what the ITF is getting frustrated with, that we know an awful lot about the condition of the pipes. And, you know, I'm trying to say to the staff is that if you explicitly were required to include the relevant pages from the Hazen-Sawyer report, and we know currently about condition, into your analysis of a development, this development is putting flow onto this infrastructure, which is shown to be at high risk. And then you could address condition. Yes, we're adding X thousand gallons to it, but there's a new project coming, but the pump station has got variable speed pumps, but we don't see any of that.
Okay,
Omar, did you want to add something? Omar?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, So operations and engineering look at this list every year before we do CIPs. And we add some of these projects to CIP projects. For instance, A7 right now is being, it's in construction. So we have brand new pump station for A7. It's going to increase, the flow is going to increase, it's bigger pumps, etc. Bigger pipes around the area. So I just wanted to point that out, that operations and engineering look at this list and we decide which pump is next for refurbishment or you know, if we need a new pump station somewhere.
Peter, before you jump in, let me jump in, okay?
Yeah.
Because I know what you're gonna say.
You do.
I think I do, okay? This list is a great list for you to determine which the next pump stations we have to put into the budget. It's not a great list for the people at Sustainable Development to look at to make a decision as to whether or not there's capacity and conditions appropriate for adding more development onto this system. And that's the missing piece.
And most importantly, Chair, it's not great for the public confidence.
Public doesn't know anything about anything. You know, that's another stuff. Transparency is a whole nother issue. But I'm trying to make sure that, or I'm trying to work my way through, as are you, how does the staff do this? And is there a better way for the staff to do this? And, you know, Dronix, is that how you pronounce your name? Dronix?
Yes.
Yes, Dronix.
Yes, that is
Listen, when you get the information, you get it from the private sector. They fill out the forms, okay? You don't review the project. You take their engineers and they send you the information. Nobody double checks. I'm assuming the engineer wouldn't put his name on it. He's got a license he can't, you know, put in jeopardy. So, but you get the information from the developer. You then look at that information. What do you do with that information?
The second the information arrives, we look at the plans. First of all, determine whether or not the connections look viable based on our water and sewer atlas and based on
so
our
you determine whether or not this specific project can hook up to the system.
We do.
Okay.
Both. Of course, we check to see what kind of pipes we have there. We check to see what kind of system we have going on in that area, and we also check before we even run calculations. We also check to see what's already existing in the area. That is something that we are required to do as soon as a capacity analysis request.
Can I just ask you a question? You say and then you check what's already existing in the area and what's proposed for the area?
Correct.
Both of those?
We actually, yes.
So you are looking. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
Go ahead. Thank you. We are generally taking a look at the existing infrastructure in the area to make sure that this new connection, if they're not using the existing connection on the site, can be placed in the location that they want to place it.
But for the most part. Yeah, but that's a physical issue. It's a physical issue of which pipe goes where. I'm talking about when this new project hits the existing system, okay? However it hits it, wherever it hits it, a new connection, an existing connection, who looks to see if the existing system, A, has capacity and B, is in a condition that it could handle more load? Is that your job or is that Department of Sustainable Development's job?
That is our job.
Okay.
We check for capacity analysis, and the capacity analysis, what it does is it provides information on the ability to connect, as well as whether or not we can handle the extra load.
Okay.
That is the point of the capacity analysis. And this is outlined in the capacity analysis letter that we provide once our analysis is done. The second we are finished with our analysis, we write a letter specifically stating whether or not infrastructure may need improvements based on the demand of the area. If we notice, for example, that a development is coming in and they require a larger pipe size in that area, we do actually state that if necessary. Because we actually
that is a recipe for putting more load onto infrastructure that might have been developed and might have been identified as being at high risk. We know a lot about what high risk infrastructure we have. but we never see in the analysis of individual developments, it is putting load onto high risk infrastructure or it isn't putting load onto high risk infrastructure.
Ralph?
Thank you. Yes, I think the Hayes and Jacobs presentation or their report certainly was a starting point to examine the different factors that could impact the ability of whether it's water or wastewater to maintain their approved capacity. One going to the George T. Lomar plant, the other producing water like the 5-ash and if you have mains that are breaking that were installed at the same decade, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and there's numerous ones that have been breaking, such as between Sunrise and Broward Boulevards. That's the red flag. I'm going back to my red flag thing. That's letting you know that that area in there that was developed in that period of time, those pipes are subject to failure, mainly because it's been the same kind of either water or wastewater in there. And in recent years, in the last 20 years, when the city stopped doing their inspection of the gravity sewers and has now created a problem with all this inflow, that has accelerated the shortening of the lives of these pipes. I mean, these are all things that should be in the equation to determine whether a moratorium should or should not be applied. And, if the health, like in the past, I remember the health department would come in and say, okay, let's, for an example, hypothetical, the 5-ash water treatment plant does not have the capacity, which it does in real life, and you have to start increasing the capacity of the 5-ash to provide the extra water needed to allow these developers to build and get their get approval for such. Otherwise, they have a moratorium and they're stopped until they can provide that. So there's not sufficient planning ahead of time to avoid these capacity problems or lack of capacity problems.
Dronix, can I ask you a question? Have you ever said no? Have you ever, in your working in this responsibility, have you ever found a situation where you got the information from the private developer, you did the analysis, and you told the Department of Sustainable Development no?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes.
Tell me
Of course,
about that.
I can tell you two instances in which this happened.
Thank you, please.
Okay. Recently, we had somebody come in for pre-DRC review, asking if they could connect to both basins A7 and A21. While A7 can hold some of the load because it has now been separated into A7 and A13, A21 cannot accept new loads at all. A21 is way over its values and it has no way of currently accepting more flows.
Right, I see A21. I see it, yes.
Correct. With that being said, I immediately had to say no, and they had to redesign their plans to connect only to A7 for sewer. Not being able to connect to sewer pretty much tells them that there's no capacity on the infrastructure. Luckily, this specific project was trying to connect to two at once, so they were able to divert their connections to A7. The second project that I can tell you is another capacity letter that just came in recently, and they're trying to develop into A21 specifically and with no other way of connecting. And our letter will reflect that they cannot connect to A21.
Okay, so then in capacity, we have reached the stage, or we can say with confidence that with you as the guardian, all right, there will be times when the capacity is not acceptable and you will say no. Is that right?
I would not say it in that language, but I will say that if the numbers support the ability to connect based on the equivalent residential units, then we will support anything that can fall within the numbers. Now, whether or not we have a sense of responsibility when it comes to that. Our actual purview is to provide the information and determine whether or not somebody can mathematically and based on our infrastructure connect to a system.
Okay, so it's, for you, it's a mathematical calculation as to the capacity of the pump station to handle the flow.
That is accurate.
Okay, so condition has nothing, am I reading it? Condition has nothing to do with it. This is capacity. Which
The
is
way we look
okay.
at
I'm not trying, it's not a trick question. I'm not trying to trick anybody here. I'm just trying to understand.
I understand. Capacity is the ability for the system to accept the load that is being inputted into it. When it comes to condition, we actually look at the pump stations to determine whether or not they can actually handle that without a lot of extra effort. That's
Oh, what does
one of
that
the graphs
mean?
that one of the graphs that we provide in our capacity analysis shows the extra load that is being added to a pump station based on the new development that is being proposed. So we do have a means, I would say, as a means of checking to see the condition of the pump station at the time of connection, based on the live information that we get from the operation side as well.
Well, wait a minute, wait, stop a second. Are you telling me that you look at the mathematical calculation and then you ask somebody, what is the condition of this pump station?
No, I am not
No,
saying that.
that's
What
not
I
what
am
you're saying.
saying is, no. What I am saying is that when we get mathematical information and we get flows and we get values from operations on a constant basis, we
Right.
actually have information from, we are connected to them directly in order to receive information.
Got it.
And that is part of our analysis. It is not prepare analysis and then ask the question. It's more take the information, run the calculations, and determine whether or not that is acceptable.
Okay, Peter, I have another interruption here. Could you please take over for a few minutes?
Yes.
Thank you.
So let me just see where we are. So we have Dronic on here, and I was just going to comment
So let me see how they do it.
on what you said there, Dronic. I was just going to say that the Hayes and Sawyer report is basically mathematical information. So it is not, subjective. It's largely mathematical. But I think we've labored on this one long enough now. So we're basically, if everybody agrees, we're under old business number 2.2 here, recap of information related to current procedures for adequacy of public infrastructure. Now, does anybody else want to ask a question? I guess, Anisha, the materials that you provided us that relate to that subject are let me just go back. We've been through the ordinance. Then we have the spreadsheet, correct, of summarizing all the various developments and the flows that they created over the years. Is that right? And we were given that information. Does anyone have a question about these spreadsheets that are keeping track of the flows from committed flows?
Just to reiterate my comment, Peter, that these charts that we see should have some kind of explanation on that certain pump stations have the variable speed and that the run times, it needs to be qualified such that it doesn't get thrown into the bucket of things that have to be examined.
So that comment applies to the table, the spreadsheet that shows the various run times. We were just specifically discussing A7 as an example. I'd like to go back to that big spreadsheet of all the developments. And I don't know who this is a question for, but at some point, particularly these older developments, what is termed committed flow will become actual flow and be reflected at the treatment plants, etc. So when do developments drop off this spreadsheet, and who is explicitly maintaining this spreadsheet of developments?
So, Peter, that spreadsheet is a spreadsheet that Igor, who's come to us and spoke with us before about, Dronix also works with him. And these are individuals that work for Public Works, but work out of DSD. So they're the individuals that work with that. And as it pertains to when things drop off, I would have to ask Dronix or Omar to specifically respond to that question.
Good afternoon. This is Gabriel.
Go ahead, Gabriel.
Dronix had to step out, and I work with Dronix and Igor. All three of us work with these capacity analysis.
Okay.
These projects get taken off the list as soon as they receive a CO. We review this pretty much every quarter, every 6 months.
So you have some projects on this spreadsheet that go back to 2012. So, and I guess they're factoring in to the committed flow, but they've never achieved a CO. Is that the correct way to understand that, these older projects?
I could give you an example, actually. The YMCA that's being built on Sistrunk, that's also an old project. It's taken a while to go through their DRC review and construction project, and they're still not done with their construction. So yes, sometimes you will see projects there that are old.
Hey, Peter, Omar here. What happens sometimes too is that a project after a year, it drops off because the project didn't happen, or if that drops off, they might reapply later, but they go to the end of the line, and that's kind of this list is put together too. So a project here that might say 2012, it might be going on for that long, but they might have reapplied for this a few times.
So then is it fair to say, Omar, then that there possibly is need of some cleanup on the spreadsheet? If you may have things that are duplicate?
No, they go through this spreadsheet every quarter, I think, or every 6 months.
Okay.
And they update this, yeah.
So
Okay.
why, there's actually two spreadsheets here, or at least totaling down to different totals. So you've got one on one page, and then a second one that straddles 3 pages actually. So in terms of summarizing the various developments and the flows that have been committed to them, does one have to look at all these pages of spreadsheets?
Gabriel or Omar?
Yes, we routinely go through all these through these spreadsheets. On your PDF, it does appear as multiple sheets, but in our screen, in our spreadsheet, it's just one giant sheet separated by the pump station bases.
Okay. Well, so let me ask you, the very first spreadsheet I'm looking at on one page, the various totals are totaled up at the bottom there under the headings water demand and sewer demand. And water demand totals up on that spreadsheet as 4.99 MGD and sewer demand 4.825 MGD. Now, the second spreadsheet, at least as we see, is similarly totaled up with slightly different totals. So should one be adding the two totaled spreadsheets together, or is there some combination of spreadsheets required? I'm just trying to understand whether these spreadsheets are showing 4.8 approximately MGD demand, or whether they're showing almost double that because you've got to add the two spreadsheets together.
Would it be okay if you guys scrolled over to the area in question?
Yeah, if you can go up, is it, Pauline? to the bottom of that spreadsheet. Keep going. That's it there. Stop there. So that you see the on the right hand side there, there's two totals. And then that if you go earlier in the agenda.
If you go up to page 32.
Yeah.
You have all the projects grouped by pump station basin, and the totals don't jive.
Yeah, maybe this is what I'm getting at, Charlie. So page 32, correct. So those totals on the right-hand side at the bottom of that spreadsheet are slightly different. My first question was, does one have to add together the two totals from the two different spreadsheets, or how should one be reading this?
I think this is an error in the production of the PDF because it should only be one. There should only be one total.
Okay, so perhaps you could clean that up, and if it can be one spreadsheet like this, like we're seeing the first thing here, I really think it would be useful if something like this traveled with development proposal analyses. It's analogous in my mind to when they were keeping a trip count on the beach, and each development that came in, they plug that into the ongoing trip count. And it's the same thing here. You're plugging in committed demand for water and sewer treatment into a spreadsheet so that people can see how it's progressing. Any other questions on the spreadsheets? So that's those we
No,
looked.
wait, Peter, I have a question.
Yes, sorry, I didn't know. Yeah.
I'm back. Okay, just contractor problems. So listen, the spreadsheet, this is just data. This is not analysis. The analysis has been done previously by someone else who did the numbers, the capacity, the calculation, yada yada. This spreadsheet is simply presenting information, and it needs to be updated, et cetera, et cetera. There's no, what shall I say, analysis in this spreadsheet. Is that correct? This is just the numbers.
That is correct.
an accurate statement.
Okay, so this is an accounting, and I agree with you, Peter, that it's important, A, that it's updated, and B, that this gives a picture of a total picture of the whole system. But I still want to get back to the analysis that goes into putting this information on this spreadsheet. And from what I can see so far, the only analysis that goes into this is a calculation of capacity. And if anybody can explain to me how there's more than an analysis of the capacity issues, either the number of gallons of water that this thing is going to use, or the number of sewage it's going to produce, that's all that this spreadsheet shows us. Am I clear on this? Because that's important to me.
The way this spreadsheet works is it does reflect the outcome of the analysis of capacity for the development. It shows whether or not the numbers, it shows the numbers that are going in for proposed development. And anything that is issued as CO leaves that sheet because it is now part of our system, and we're not expecting it to be a committed flow. This spreadsheet only shows what we expect to come into the system at any given time.
Good.
The analysis itself includes more than just is this greater than the other, because we also take into account our mathematical model that actually we have to run to determine whether or not the pipes can handle the extra load, which is where we determine if the system can handle. If we put too much demand on an area that has a small water infrastructure, for example, if we put a high rise on a 4-inch pipe, that is going to create an excessive demand on the system that would create issues for the immediate area. And that is something we take into account.
That's good, because what that tells me is that you're looking at not only the numbers, the mathematical calculation, but then you're looking at the pipe to see if the pipe is big enough to handle that mathematical calculation. You still have not looked at how old is that pipe, what's the likelihood of failure of that pipe, Has that pipe had failures, breaks in the last, 2-3 years? That's not part of your analysis. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. I'm not saying that you're at fault or anything. I'm just trying to make sure that we all understand what goes into this analysis. Was my characterization correct?
That is accurate.
Thank you. Okay, Sean, let's get Shane back into this conversation.
I got a question about the second spreadsheet that starts on page 33. The first couple of lines, well, there's several lines that, they're showing a certificate of occupancy issue date. So then the demand is moved from committed to actual flow. Why are those still shown on this spreadsheet? Is there another column that's not in here that's accounting for actual flow, or is that just fluff at this point? The first spreadsheet on 32 is nice and concise, and it's only committed flows, whereas this, you have several lines that, there is no committed flow. It's not being calculated at the end, and it just seems like extra where you can kind of consolidate the spreadsheet into a little more useful information.
Gabriel, are you there? One thing that I can say that I didn't know that I learned today is that this is one giant spreadsheet, and actually it's being separated so it could show on this in this format for you all to look at. But is that part of the answer, Adronics? That why it's being shown the way that it's shown?
Yes, the amount of information that we have, the amount of committed projects that we have currently as part of the entire system is so large that we cannot show it in one sheet unless, of course, we reduce the font to like one. For us to show the spreadsheet in its full, with all of the numbers that are current at the time, we have to break it up into multiple sections. I believe the copy that you have right now is something that Igor provided previously, which is just, this is pretty much an excerpt of our sheet. This is, when we look at this spreadsheet, it is one continuous spreadsheet. It is not broken up into pages. It is not broken up into sections. We're looking at the totals at the very bottom or on the side, depending on how we have it set up. This right here is, I believe, some of the confusion may come from the fact that this is broken up for presentation so that the information is visible, and also so that it's not overwhelming.
Okay, I have a
Ralph, next.
Thank you. Just something else that I had said sometime in the past, and my brain cells finally woke up, is back when I was an engineer for the county and even in private practice, it was only with potable water, it was only really basically the health department that was issuing a moratorium because of the treatment plants not having the capacity to deliver any more than what was being proposed by the developers. The thing that I've since consider an integral part of the moratorium, since we're talking about moratorium, is the ability for a water distribution system to be able to meet fire flow requirements. And I'm not talking about the static one where they go out, and if they meet 50 psi at the fire hydrants, I'm talking about the dynamic testing of fire flow to see if they can get the actual FLAR demand, such as like in a residential, it's only 500 gallons per minute. In a more populated or denser, let's say it's 1,500 gallons per minute with a residual pressure of 20 psi. Is that something that really, in my thinking, it should be part of the evaluation, determining whether or not a moratorium should be imposed or not? Because if you can't fight the fires with the regulatory requirements, you shouldn't, you need to either upgrade the size of the pipes or increase the pressure at the treatment plant. But can somebody address that, to think that's a worthy component to consider in addition to just the capacity of the treatment plants, the firefighting capability?
Our current analysis requires us to have at a minimum 30 psi of residual pressure on the fire line, on our water system in order to combat fire. With that being said, whether or not it is out of our purview to recommend moratorium, because that is not a decision that we make. What we do is we provide information and we provide analysis in order for anybody to make a decision.
Okay, so let me follow up on that, Ralph. So you saying that every hydrant in the city has 30 psi residual pressure after somebody is fighting a fire? Is that the standard?
No.
That is a standard, but I am not saying that they all have it. What I am saying is that we calculate for it whenever we're trying to allow new development through our analysis. We are trying to make sure that they do.
So how do you do that?
That is part of our water model. Our water model does for GIS data and positioning data on the water system. Also, we have a GIS map of current fire hydrants inspections and their historical flows. We actually take that into account as well. We think that we use as part of our analysis, as part of the inputs into the mathematical model in order for us to conduct analysis of the system at the time that we are receiving information from the developers for us to add their proposal into our system.
Ralph, did you understand that?
I still think it should be. I still think it should be part of it. Maybe Rick Johnson can enumerate on that. I've been out conducting fire flow tests and training people when I was with the county. It was just one of my little tidbits, but and I just know how important it is to do the dynamic flow test out there. And, you know, we not only found that some of the pressures in the systems were bad, not necessarily because there wasn't adequate pipe size, but it was partially closed valves or some other nature. But I believe if you can't put out the fires in the distribution area, then, you know, you don't want to build more to increase the danger to the public.
Rick?
Hi, yeah, this is Rick. So Ralph, to answer your question, a engineer of record or a developer can order a dynamic flow test, which they should do in order to determine whether or not a particular water main in front of a new development will provide that capacity. So it's ordered, I think, through DSD, and then the work order eventually comes to utility staff, which will go out there and do the flow test.
So Rick, are you telling me that every development that comes in and gets reviewed at DRC, the guy has done one of these dynamic flow tests?
I can't say every single one, but I know typically large projects or multi-story buildings usually have that done, yes.
Yeah, and DRC will not issue a DRC review unless they see evidence of that?
I can't answer that.
Okay, because I was hoping we didn't have to worry about firefighting. I was hoping that we were.
Well, we always have to worry about firefighting.
One
of the issues that we've seen is that when a developer has a test ordered, it still could be 2 years before the design is complete and construction starts. And there may have been other developments that have occurred in that time frame which would impact the final capacity on that particular water main.
Oh God, I'm sorry you're telling me this, because I thought we had
That's
fire.
reality.
I thought we had fire down. We don't have fire down. See, what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to understand the processes. This is like digging into the weeds a little bit, but if you don't understand what analysis goes into this spreadsheet, which is all that matters. This is the only thing that matters is this spreadsheet. But if you don't understand the analysis that goes into the spreadsheet, then we have not done our job to determine, as Mr. Spencer says, is there a problem significant enough that it warrants a moratorium? And if you're telling me that, for instance, the guy did a flow test 2 years ago. He got his building permit. The building is built, and now the flow test doesn't show the right amount of flow. They're not going to empty the building.
That's happened to us.
That's not good.
It's- we know.
Okay. Shane.
Marilyn, there's also additional checks that after the fact, for instance, when they go for their final, they have to do fire flow test through their sprinkler system, which, safeguards from the city issuing a CO if there is a pressure issue. But it's my understanding that Rick has SCADA information of several pressure gauges throughout the city and has a general idea of the pressure that's in the water mains at any given moment. Granted, that's not exactly the same as a residual pressure on a fire flow test, but the city has a general idea of their pressures at any area in the city.
That's just normal operating pressures, Shane.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ralph, you cool with that?
Well, I realize both, and the problem is with the static is that it's a static condition. The true thing is when you're needing water, you need to rely on the dynamic testing and actual condition where the flows are needed to extinguish a fire. So I mean, I can get a 20 psi on my garden hose. And as soon as I turn it on, it goes down. I probably get more than I get about 30 psi, but when I turn it on, it goes down to 1 or 2 psi. So there's a difference between the static and the dynamic. The dynamic is the real life situation where you're out there fighting a fire, and if you've got, say, 50 psi reading from a static and you turn that water on and it goes down to 10 psi, that's beneath the 20 psi minimum required to deliver that capacity of flow that you need to extinguish the fire. But I just bring it up because I think that should be part of the equation. We don't want to have, oh yeah, we've got plenty of capacity, but it comes down to the smallness of the water main sizes that can't deliver the water to the fire hydrant or fire hydrants, plural, to meet that fire flow demand.
Okay, well, I think water is really the next big issue that we have to tackle. And I think we're getting on to 5 o'clock, and I'm trying to think of how to move this discussion forward. Now that Rick is with us, Rick, we talked a little bit about the fact that we have a lot of information or a lot more information about the sewer system than we have about the water system. That you are in the process of updating maps and getting, more information about the water system. And maybe next month, we can talk more about this and delve a little deeper into the fire thing.
Madam Chair, I can speak real quick on that if you want.
Sure, we got a couple of minutes. Let's go.
Okay, so the mapping that's being done by WGI that Anisha talked about earlier is strictly to provide location of our assets, not condition assessment.
Thank you. It's good to know.
That's number one. Ralph did mention that whenever we have a break, we basically get a condition assessment at that area, and that's true. We do document that, and that's what we've been using over the years to develop CIP projects. But yes, we are exploring some other kind of non-invasive assessments, if you will, of the water system to try to see if we can determine the conditions for tuberculation, things like that.
Rick, you also had provided us with a series of maps and charts showing where recent water breaks have been.
We have one. I think Pauline has it.
Yeah.
It's in there. It's in the report, Madam Chair.
Right.
That's the monthly report that we provide.
Correct. So system-wide where your, should I call them vulnerable areas are. I mean, if you have 3 breaks in a line, you can pretty much figure that that's a vulnerable line, a line at high risk of failure.
Correct.
Would you say that's true?
That's true.
So you could actually based upon just the breaks, make an assessment of where your most vulnerable parts of the system are.
Absolutely. Breaks, pipe age, and pipe material would be the three main factors.
Okay, so it's very similar to what Hazen did with the sewer pipes. They checked on the
Absolutely.
condition, the age, the breaks, da 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 da. So
Yes.
could we talk a little bit more about that at our next meeting, and make sure that everybody is sort of up to speed on the water, as up to as much speed on the water as we are on the sewer, so that we can, focus on those areas in our analysis.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Chair, I'm
Yes.
sorry, two things I wanted to mention. So as it pertains to the next month, the only thing we'll be able to talk about is where Rick is with regards to the mapping with WGI. On the condition assessment, we have not gotten started on that. And that's what I was referring to, how we're actually trying to take more CIP money to utilize towards the water side for condition assessments and such. We're not there yet. We're only doing the mapping to identify all of the assets. And we're doing with City Works, we're actually launching that in June, and we're starting with water first. So as we actually have issues in our system, when we actually have work order, we'll be able to start to record a lot of that information in our GIS system so we can get a head start on that. So that's something that we're going to be doing going forward. And if I may go back to fire, in our December meeting, we did talk about fire, and we provided with dashboard reports of 3 years of how we're doing the inspections of our fire hydrants. And also I had the chief to speak with Mr. Zeltman to share with him some of the information that we had of what we're doing. So I know we talked about some things, and it sounded somewhat alarming, but after we had the conversations in December and after the conversations with the chief, I thought we were in a much better place. So I didn't understand where the conversations were going today. I don't think that everything is hunky-dory, but I do believe that we have a pretty good handle on it, with the fact that we know which hydrants are out, and we're doing inspections on a regular basis.
That was my impression, that we had a pretty good handle on the fire.
Yes.
Adequate fire.
And I agree with that. And I agree with that. But my bringing it up was essentially trying to include that as part of the evaluation for moratorium or non-moratorium. And,
Okay.
and if the system is, and the system is, I remember, was based on the 50 PSI static. And, if that's gives you all comfort level, I mean, I'm just bringing up to include the firefighting capability as part of the moratorium. I don't think that should be ignored, just my personal feeling on that. And I'll take this time to thank the city staff. I mean, they've really done terrific jobs in the last 3 to 4 or 5 years with all this that's occurring, with the wastewater especially, and then they've got their problems with the older water mains. They've done an excellent job. So I'm not negatively, attacking that. I'm trying to maybe include something else in the equation that would better provide public safety.
Great. So Ralph, what I'm thinking is, when we go to the commission and they asked us the big question, we would be telling them, these are the things that you analyze when you look at a development permit. And from what we've staff and we have looked at of the fire situation, great improvements have been made. We now know where everything is. We now know, A, B, C, D, E. Perhaps they have to be worried about this other little piece, and add that into the equation. But it's not like we would be saying there's a problem with the fire.
Exactly right.
Okay,
That's
good.
it. It's just here's a suggestion. You might want to consider putting something in there with regards to firefighting capability.
Excellent. Okay, listen, guys and gals. No, there's no more gals. Oh yeah, there are lots of gals. It's 4:47, and we've gone through a lot of information. I don't know about you, but my brain is a little frazzled. Is there any other questions anyone wants to ask about the material we've gone over so far? So we could sort of sum this up and and move to the adjournment of this meeting and contemplation of the next. Does anybody have any questions to any of the staff that's online?
Well, Chair, I'm hoping we can at least move to the next item.
Alrighty, can we go quickly to the next item? And the next item would be the, where is it? Let me get it.
Funding opportunities.
New funding. Well, we did talk a little bit about it previously, but yes, let's talk some more about it.
Well,
I mentioned two things. Do you have other things you want to talk about?
Yes.
Those are the only two that I know of. I'm sorry, Peter, if there's something else you know of.
No, what you just tell us what you intended to say under this item, and then I'll say my piece, please.
The only thing was basically the project that is in the Middle River water quality improvement that is for federal dollars, and it's the two projects which one Chairman Mano mentioned was with the tidal valve installation, and then the other project on 21st Ave pipe. And these two projects is for the $9 million, and they're with the Congress right now. And there's a joint agreement with Wilton Manors in Oakland Park. And I do believe that it should be looked at this week. And there's a lot of support, memos that have gone from all of the cities, the resolution, and with all of the different support that we've seen, we're hopeful for this to go forward.
So can I ask a question about that? While I was away the first time, did we take a vote to support that application for those funds?
Yes, I think we did, didn't we?
I thought you did before you left.
Okay, no, the one that we took a vote that I remember we took a vote on was to support the tidal valves. But did we take a vote on supporting the joint, the $9 million joint grant? Did we take a vote on that?
Probably not.
No, okay.
No, ma'am, just the first.
Just the first. Thank you so much, Krista. Okay, I just wanted to note that. So do you want a letter of support from the committee?
Sure, but I just wanted to be clear, Chairman Mano, there are two projects, but they're both pertaining to the Middle River water quality improvement. And one is going to Congressman Hastings, and then the other one is going to
Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you.
Yeah, we did the Wasserman Schultz. Do you want us to do something to the other person?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I don't think we have enough people. 1, 2, 3, 4. We do. Okay. Can I get a resolution from the members to support the what's the official name of the second one? The Middle River.
That's the name for both. It's Middle River water quality improvement. I'll forward you. Why don't I do this? I can send you a copy of one of the support letters.
Yeah.
And that way you'll have that, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people here, and it would be really nice if the 6 people here as a committee were to express their support for the grant.
So I make a motion that the ITF supports the application for the grant. Is it 9 million for the Middle
River
water quality project?
Thank you. Do I get a second on that? Ralph seconded. Everybody in favor, say aye. Okay,
Aye.
that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Roosevelt, are you still with us? Can you hear us? Roosevelt, I see you're on your phone, Roosevelt. Can you unmute yourself? No, I guess not. Well, is 5 enough? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
*6, he can unmute himself.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Pauline?
*6. If he presses *6, he can unmute himself.
Oh, Roosevelt, hi, are you with us?
I'm still here. I've been with you the whole time.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, well, how do you vote on supporting that, the grant for?
I voted aye.
Okay, thank you. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. And do we still have a quorum at 6? Thank you all. Okay, so those are the 2 that were on the table. Peter, do you have a second or a third one you want to talk about?
I'm hoping that Dr. Gassman is still around. I saw in the newspaper, somebody still reads newspapers, that as part of the current administration first stimulus, I think it's called the Coronavirus Relief Act, that the state of Florida governor, money has come out of that the state's way, and he's proposing the 1 million out of what's come out of that Coronavirus Relief Act, 1 billion, be dedicated to resiliency projects. And that, the way the newspaper said it, that is, quote, on top of 1 billion already proposed in his, I think, 2022 state budget. So I just wanted to flag that in case it needs some investigation, and we need to be pushing for the money. Pretty much everything I'm going to say relates to the big picture that you said, Chair, that there's all sorts of money just coming out of the woodwork in the near future. So that was that one. And then I was doing a little more research into this transportation surtax. That is 15.6 billion over 30 years. And it occurs to me that if the commission is pursuing a rail tunnel under the New River, that is a sort of project that they could go after surtax money for. But the point I wanted to make is it's been my experience when there's large amounts of, actually particularly federal money, but to a lesser extent state and county money, that you really need good lobbyists to go after this money. And I'm hoping that